All right, so it's enforcing the peace with Neill Franklin. Neill, we have bridged the chasm to the next decade. We are squarely, firmly imprinted now in the 21st century. Welcome.
We're here.
Here we are. And you and I got to talking. We wanted to talk about equity, obviously, with cannabis. And some of that is social equity. Some of that is industry equity. Some of that is just, equity as far as records are concerned, expungement and such. And then you started talking about policing equity.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, what I'm hearing is it's equal to what it was. Which isn't necessarily,
not a whole lot changes. I mean, we've had issues with policing regarding disparity in policing and stops relative to blacks versus whites versus Latinos and so on. And as we move forward with adult use markets for cannabis, right? One of the things that a lot of people envision is that, well, since a vast majority of these stops, regarding disparity, are relative to police and marijuana, enforcing marijuana laws. Obviously, they're easy stops because of the distinct odor of marijuana. It's easy to walk up on someone, stop someone for driving, and next thing you know, you're searching their car or you're arresting them or whatever the case may be. But it's that initial probable cause to do whatever you need to do from there. So people thought, well, now that we're moving toward legalization for adult use, maybe this is going to change. It's going to change. No, it needs to be more conscious than that, than just a change in the law. And this is what I mean regarding policing. When you look at Colorado, which was one of the first two states to move forward with legalizing adult use,
and actually the first state to put it into a legal infrastructure. It took Washington State another 6 months just for those keeping score at home. But go on.
Absolutely, devil's in the detail.
Yeah.
But as we look at those numbers of police encounters, stops, and arrests, and so on, in Colorado, although the overall gross number of stops for every arrest for every demographic has declined dramatically by thousands in the state of Colorado, the disparity issue remains. So what I mean by that is that the rate, when you look at those fewer arrests that are now taking place, there's still an overwhelming number of blacks being arrested compared to whites. So we still have the disparity issues. And in many cases, what would have typically been a misdemeanor crime, say like for possession, we're now seeing cases of possession with intent to distribute.
Because so let me get to, right?
Let me unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And now we're going to move a little bit further east to Maryland, the state that I'm in.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at one county in particular, Montgomery County. And I want to pick this county because I'm intimately familiar with the arrests that have been occurring in that county regarding marijuana, because I'm working with the public defender's office in that county on some of these cases. So in Maryland, we have, as in many states across the country, we have decriminalized possession of marijuana up to a certain amount. So in Maryland, it's up to anything below 10 grams is a civil infraction now. It's no longer a criminal offense. However, in certain counties in Maryland, like Montgomery County, although we're seeing a lot fewer arrests for possession because of that, what's happening, police are charging people with intent to distribute for amounts under 10 grams. And you're kind of like, well, how does that happen? Well, if I happen to buy marijuana from someone who's selling maybe gram packages, and I buy 6 or 7, and then I get stopped by the police, and they see, oh, you've got 7 packs of marijuana, must not be for personal use, you're probably selling it, charging you with possession with intent to distribute. No other evidence, no records, no phone records to indicate that you're selling, no scales, no money, no other corroborating evidence other than you have 6 or 7 packs of marijuana, yet under the 10-gram threshold, but charging them with a felony. We're seeing these go up.
Mm.
And they're not just going up for everyone. Of the cases I've been analyzing and looking at, only blacks are being charged with possession with intent to distribute. I have yet to see one white person charged with this for an amount under 10 grams.
So this is remarkable. This is worse. They figured out a way to make it worse.
It's a big problem.
So, and obviously it's a huge problem. And so I'm glad I'm talking to you about this. As far as industry equity, we've now been pretty good about writing that into regulations. And, Illinois, we've had at least a conversation in passing about how good that legislation was. And how that is rolling out in at least in a positive way. We'll cross every bridge as we get to it. As far as expungement, you can see those programs rolling out all over the country. What do we do? Is it as simple as changing the law at the state level, saying, okay, obviously we see that you're charging for possession with intent to sell under 10 grams. That's no longer illegal. That's no longer intent to sell. Is it as easy as that?
It's actually easier.
Okay.
According to some prosecutors. We have prosecutors like Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Rachel Rollins in the Boston area, Kim Fox out in Illinois, out in Chicago, Cook County. They're pretty much saying to the police, I don't care what the amount, don't bring these cases to me unless you have clear and convincing evidence that the person is selling. Okay, you've got cell phone records that show how much they're selling to who and list of names or whatever. You've got scales, you've got packaging materials, you've got all the other evidence that would be there for someone who is selling or intending to sell.
Anything other than you just
they're
went
not
to a
changing
store
any laws, man. Yeah. They're not going through the hassle of changing laws. They're just saying, look, as of now, today, don't bring these cases to me. Right. I'm not going to prosecute them. Don't waste your time. Don't waste my time. And more importantly, don't waste the time of our citizens.
Now, I'll put your old captain hat on, if you would, please, sir. When a prosecutor says that to law enforcement, how does law enforcement actually receive it?
Well, I tell you, in some cases, well, the daggone phone's ringing. Anyway, it is stopped. In some cases, the police management folks, the captains, the majors, the chiefs are saying, okay, they're sending out, orders to their people. Let's not move forward these cases anymore. Okay, we're changing policy. Here's what we do step by step. Here's what we do. Here's what we don't do. But in some cases, Seth, we have police leaders saying, well, as long as it's still a law on the books, we're going to enforce it. We're going to make the stops, and we'll let the prosecutor's office deal with the people we bring to them. And it's, in my opinion, this is very irresponsible because we
legitimately sounds like a waste of my taxpayer money right there.
It's a waste of a lot, including your taxpayer money.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we in management have to realize is that although the public sentiment is to change these laws, it takes time. Right. It takes time for the bill to be drafted, to go through the legislature at the right time, and then to come into effect, whether it's in October, whether it's in January. And by then, so many lives are disrupted in a pretty negative way. Yeah. So why do that when the public sentiment is to move in a different direction? And then you have responsible folks who are elected and put in positions, and they work for us, and they should do what we want them to do.
So at least three components here. Number one, sounds like active prosecutors communicating what they're interested in, what they will do, what they won't do. That's a key, certainly.
Right.
Active law enforcement folks receiving that message, with due respect to what the actual law is on the books. Here's what my prosecutors are telling me. Okay, we're going to change based on what, the prosecutors are acting. And then third, obviously, state legislatures, if we're seeing a discrepancy here in arrests and folks are, using old tricks in new ways for, like we said, even worse results, time to change those books. Make sure that we can't do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You
All
know,
right.
so, I just wanted to touch on one thing real quick.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., they don't have a regulated market yet, but they've moved forward in a sense saying you can grow it, you can share it with your friends, you can smoke it indoors, blah, blah, blah. They still have a public smoking, a policy in place, or laws in place. But here's a problem when it comes to uh, economics, right?
Hmm.
When it comes to poor folks versus the affluent. We're seeing an uptick in arrest in places like Washington, D.C. Again, great disparity issues, blacks being arrested far more than whites. But this is a social economic thing, because if you're poor and you're living in public housing, you can't smoke in public housing. So
That's
what do?
illegal.
You go out in the street and you smoke. This is the problem when we don't put laws in place so that we can open, say, like clubs for smoking marijuana, like we do bars and pubs where you can go in and drink, because you can't drink in the streets. So you have bars and pubs and where you can go and enjoy booze. We need the same thing for cannabis, because poor folks don't have the elaborate homes where they can smoke and have parties and not get in trouble with their neighbors. As a matter of fact, they invite their neighbors over and they all have a good time. But it's not the same in poor communities where you have public housing, where you have people living close together, and they end up going out into the streets, and next thing you know, here come the police rolling up. And
Washington, D.C. is extremely unique, and we'll, kind of tackle that whole thing, I think, another time. But,
yeah,
that public housing issue, we've been talking about that in Oakland for a long time. And, if you're going to change the laws and make something legal, you got to follow the supply chain, if you will, all the way through to the person that legally acquires a product at a legal establishment. Where does that person enjoy that product that he or she has legally? And if there is no good answer to that question, time to change the books.
absolutely.
There we go.
I got to invent one of them smokeless ashtrays again, come up with a better model than what they did in the past, so that people can enjoy their cannabis and no one else smell it. So we'll see what happens.
Well, you and me will get together on that. Well, it'll be a different podcast completely. Major Neill Franklin, thank you so much. I always appreciate talking to you, my friend.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Seth.